Good morning and welcome. You're with the Skeinz Diaries, episode 175, a very special edition today on a Friday. Yes, I know I'm here on a Friday, Friday the 8th of July. And I know many of you, this is not a surprise, but the reason it's a very special edition is because I am joined this morning by the fantastic Libby from Truly Myrtle, because we've got something really exciting to tell everybody today. Oh gosh, they're all flooding and we can
Oh,
chit-chat.
yay. Hi, everybody.
Yay.
I know
just
it's exciting morning.
weather. I was just saying it's
Oh.
howling out here and raining, and you've said it's been miserable up your way.
Pouring in the night, so loud. And now it's just windy. Not crazy wind, but yeah, it's definitely windy and grey.
Good knitting weather.
So I was just thinking, light the fire and curl up.
I know, it was so funny because yesterday I did the diaries and I was all rugged up and Ethan was on and he was all rugged up and I had loads of my Americans and they're like, it's so funny, look at you guys all rugged up. And of course they're in a heat wave at the moment. So they're all in flip-flops.
I know, well, I've got my cardigan that I can't take off. Everyone will be like, Libby, do you ever get changed? No, I don't actually at the moment. I just stay in the same clothes every day because I'm really keen on this jumper. It's so nice to see everybody pouring in the door.
They are all pouring in the door. It's so good to see everybody this morning. Yeah, so we've got some really exciting stuff to talk about today. And also, we'll start this off while everyone's coming in, is you are also coming back on Monday. So we're going to do a double whammy because we're going to talk about everything we're talking about today. And then we're going to do a special Q&A on Monday. So you guys may not have, guys may have some questions today. Save those all up until Monday because we're going to do a Q&A on Monday. Charles is in the house. He says hello, and it's very hot.
Hi, Charles. How are you?
Hi, Charles. Yes, so we're going to do that on Monday as well, because we know that by the time you get through the weekend, you may have some pattern questions you want to ask. We're going to talk a lot about substitution, a little bit about that today to help with your planning. But the biggest thing that we're going to talk to everybody about today, of course, is the
yarn. A new yarn. It's exciting. It's so exciting. My mind's a bit like, I can't believe this has actually happened.
I know. We are so excited. So for those who haven't caught up with what's happening, our Southlander yarn, of course, as many of you know, is one of our flagship yarns. It has been one of the original yarns that Skeinz, and then prior to Skeinz, and it is factory shop and design spun created. We've been selling it since 1975. It is a Kiwi staple for so many people. And you and I, this all started with a conversation that you and I had forever ago.
I think it was a long
time ago. And I think this is a culmination of not months but years of chatting and talking, and what we have gone and done. Well, when I hit the royal we, I've done very little. You've done most of the work.
It is a we. It's a fabulous collaboration. I love it.
It is a fabulous collaboration. And Libby has designed a collection of yarns from both across our DK weight and our sport weight in Southlander. But what I love about this collection so much is that there is the emotion, the stories, and the things evoked by the collection. And it's awesome because all of these colors, the neat thing is Libby's been playing around with these colors. They're across, usually when we dye yarns for Southlander, we only put them across our bracken base, which is the browner base, natural base, so we get these sort of darker shades. But we actually also have now put colors back over the oatmeal, which we've not done for a really long time, and it's gone and given us a whole new depth for color. And all of these colors work together as arranged themselves, but they also work with our other Southlander colors, which is wonderful. But firstly, talk me through when you were pulling these colors together. I know you talked about this in the hangout yesterday, but I just love some of the stories around some of the names. So run us through some of those, because I think that will really help give people an idea of what your process was in evoking some of these colors.
Do you know, I love it that I love it that Southlander has been around since the early 70s, because so have I. And I think, and I think that when I put and I love it that Southlander is this mixed breed yarn. right? It's a little bit, it's this crossbreed. It's a little bit of everything. So, and that is me too. I don't think I can say I'm any one thing. I am this total melting pot of cultures that has made me. And I was so keenly aware of that when I was growing up. It was really, it was my mum. Thanks to my mum, you know, this has been a really important part of our life, is to know who we are. And we are a myriad of things in our family. So when I came around to designing the colors, a lot of this just was very intuitive for me. I did reach for colors that I have always loved. That evoke ideas for me. I mean, this was one of the first things that I knew I had to have, was this absolutely electric mustard, because it's just so joyful. And when I think about all of the women in my family, there's a lot of joy that has come down through, you know, both sides of my mum's family and my dad's family. Lots of laughing, lots of chatting, endless chatting, and discussing.
And did you have one of those families that through the 70s and early 80s, when you were growing up, it was, for me, it was the memory of sitting around either the kitchen table or a makeshift table. There were lots of garage parties and woolshed parties, and just lots of talking and laughter.
So much talking. Well, of course,
stories.
my dad's family have quite strong Jewish roots. So there's a lot of talking that comes down that line too. But my mum's side as well, endless talking. And one of the things actually that my mum did for me was that I grew up sitting around the dining room table at our house, big dining room table, listening to all the mothers talk. And they talked and talked and talked, and they talked about such fascinating things. I would sit there quietly. Mum said I wouldn't say anything. I just sit there quietly listening. And they'd talk about politics, and they'd talk about cultural issues, and they'd talk about all sorts of stuff, things they'd been reading. And they had all these kids running around, and it was quite intellectual talk, a lot of it. And I just soaked it up when I was a young girl. It really did form a lot of the way I thought I wanted to be as a woman when I was growing up, listening to that. But I can remember Christmases with the whole, you know, all the kids running around and the whole family. And my parents have a big old villa, and they'd passing sausages in and out of the window with umbrellas outside, you know, because it always rains on Christmas Day. But it was just endless fun and joy and adventure, really, growing up. So lots of these stories, though, I would listen to sitting on the end of Mum and Dad's bed. They've got this big old bed. It actually was her grandmother's bed, this bed. And I'd sit on the end of the bed with my toast in the morning, and Mum would tell me all of these stories. And they'd be stories from her own childhood, stories from her parents' childhood. And she'd managed to glean a lot of stories from my dad's mum as well. So I heard all these stories growing up from them. So I've tried to translate some of them into colors. Some of the colors came first and the stories came later, and some of the stories came first and the colors came, you know, they kind of came
the stories inspired the color.
They did. But I thought it was funny actually that the very first one that I put together was this Maudie that I'm wearing now. It's the new pattern that's out today. It's this it's my favorite teal green. I've had a hankering for this color forever and a day. And this was named after the oldest of my relatives, Nathan Goldwasser. He would have been Goldwasser, Goldwater. And I just remembered last night, I was thinking, you know, he was a tailor. That he actually, by a young boy, his dad was a tailor. They used to do a lot of making clothes. And I've got a whole written record of that side of the family. And he was quite an accomplished young sewer when he was a young boy. And that dressmaking actually ran right through the family. My dad's dad ended up having a fashion factory with his brother here in Auckland when he was alive. But this courage was his story of him. I don't know. I've told all of these stories over on my podcast, so you can go and have a little listen over there if you want. But this story, the story of Nathan, was really quite profound for me, because I just, as a young kid, listening to the story of a boy he was a boy, 14-year-old boy, who escaped persecution and walked across Europe to get away and to have another life. And his mother never saw him again. And part of that family went to America, and part of that family came to New Zealand. There were lots of a few brothers. And they're in the records that are written about this when it happened, the story goes that the mother hadn't heard from one of the boys, the one that went to America, and she said something about a boy who forgets his mother forgets his God. She wrote that in a letter to someone. But yes, it was a really such an incredible act of courage. And I grew up believing this could be possible. You know, it was really quite profound for me. But there's all sorts of other colors in here. This one, that's because you can already grab it off my website and the Skeinz website now. I think it's up there as well.
Yeah, no, it's live. I put it all live just before we went.
This color has been super popular. And one thing I forgot to say yesterday, this color is for my mum's mother. And her name was Emmeline. She was called Tommy by my grandfather. She's Lee. She's my middle name. And I called her Nanum. All the kids called her Nanum. Nanum taught me how to knit. This is Nanum's color. This is her very favorite color. But for the grandma that sat down with me when I was about 6 and taught me how to knit, that was Nanum. And I adore this color. And in fact, I've got it on my needles right now.
Oh, it's so funny because I've got Delene who's doing our sample knitting. She's got that on her needles as well too, doing the Phoenix.
Yeah, so this one is hope. This one is hope. And that really sums up my Nanum. She was a woman of optimism. I'm a lot like my grandmother, my mum tells me. I knew my grandmother, but not as a woman. She died when I was, actually all my grandparents that were alive died when I was pregnant with my first baby, which was just terrible all at the same time when I was over in the UK. But this was Nanum, and yeah, I just remember sitting up with her in her bed. There must have been a history of sitting in mother's beds, I think, when I was growing up. And she'd have her grapefruit cut in half for breakfast, and she always had these beautiful little cups of tea in her special Nanum cup. And she just, anything seemed possible with Nanum. I think it was always possible with Nanum. She was the one, she sort of set up things like church mothers groups, and you know, she just organized everybody, get them all sorted into groups and teams and all sorts of things like that. She was very busy like that. But yeah, that one was for Nanum. That was my hope. So I don't know. I guess this one is another one, which really, if it wasn't for this one, then none of these stories would have come to life. This one is Storyteller, and this one is for my mum, Jude. And lots of you have met my mum, Jude. She's been on my podcast, and she lives not far from me, actually. I'm going to get her back on the podcast. But my mum, Jude, I grew up listening to my mum, Jude, telling me stories of her own childhood, and stories of Dad, when she and Dad met, just these rich, absolute rich, vivid pictures that she would paint for me of all of the fabulous things that all of my ancestors did. So this one is Storyteller, and it's the perfect brown. I don't know if Mum's thrilled about having the perfect brown, but this feels like a very mum color. It is absolutely beautiful. So my mother has never gone grey, like her mother as well. I don't know if I'll follow them or not, but so she looks amazing in this color. It really brings her alive, I think, this beautiful pinky brown. But there's all sorts of fun stories for Mum. I thought I'd get her to tell some of her own when she came on. I remember the story of her. She's quite wicked, I think, as a young girl. I remember she told me a story of when she reached in at school, and she reached in the window in the toilet and flushed the chain, and somebody was on the toilet. She got in terrible trouble for that at school. I think she actually blamed someone else initially. But there's all sorts of fabulous stories. What one are you holding up there?
Oh no, that's the Storyteller here.
Oh, that's
my camera, it looks quite different to your camera, so that's why.
Yeah, it's a really pinky brown.
It is. It's like a mushroomy. It's almost sort of got a whole mushroomy quality to it.
It does, yeah. And one of the things I love about
it's like a warm brown,
about these colors, one of the things I love about these colors, and this was a little unexpected for me, is that I ended up achieving colors that I adore by dyeing some on the pale base and some on the darker base. And the way they tone together is absolutely glorious. So this is Grace. I'll tell you, I've got one more story to tell about my grandmother, actually, because it reminded me of this is my mum's mother-in-law, Belinda. This is Grace. But one more story about my Nanum. She was quite, I think the boys quite like Nanum. And there's a story of when she was young, and she was courting a couple of guys at the same time, and my grandfather was one, and then this other boy was the other. And apparently one day they both turned up at the same time, and one went to the front door and one went to the back door. And the story goes that her father stood with her in the middle of the house. This is the house in I think still Vigor Brown Street in Napier. And he said to her, "Well, Tommy, which door's it going to be? Which door?" And she had to decide which door she was going to choose, and she ended up choosing the door of my grandfather. So she went and married him, and he was fabulous. So this is his color. There's so many colors and so many relatives, but this one is for my umpire, and it's called Liberty. And Umpire used to call me Liberty. And I didn't really understand the significance of that when I was a little girl, but he fought in the war, and he just adored us. He absolutely adored us. And he used to be a wise counsel for my mum, I think, when we were little. He was a silver fox, my grandfather, when I knew him. He had very olive skin. I get my olive skin from him, and absolutely beautiful silver hair, and his eyes were this color. Just this beautiful, beautiful brown. He was a good-looking guy. Yeah, so he was a really bright man too. He was a man who worked very hard. He was just so interested in lots of things, and he was born onto a farm, but he put himself through university when he was a young man, and ended up having quite a prestigious job for New Zealand over in the UK. And they wined and dined and visited the Queen and had a really wonderful time when they were over there. So yeah, this one is Liberty for my granddad. There's one that I've cast on actually, which I adore this color. Absolutely adore this color. I haven't finished this jumper. It's still got bits and pieces. I've got to the bottom. I'm trying to work out what I'm going to do with the cuffs. And this one is Curiouser. This main color here is Curiouser. It has a little bit of the grace in it, and it has a little bit of that gold in it, which is the joy. And then it has some of the Southlander cream. I've got some of the oatmeal as well, chucked in there just to pull it all together. But that Curiouser, that's my dad. It really is my dad. And I have inherited a huge whack of my dad in me. Dad is insatiable. He is just the most curious person. He needs to know everything about everything. And he dives down rabbit holes and then doesn't come out till he's at the bottom. And I have a tendency to do much the same. I just find life absolutely fascinating. It's so fascinating. I don't think I'm ever bored. I tell my kids, I don't remember being bored as a kid. I always had something to do, always had something to investigate. So this is my dad, Curiouser. One other thing about my dad, and actually this comes back to one of the other colors here, the scholar color. This is sort of a color about knowing, a wisdom, and a truth, those kind of things. One of the things about my dad that I absolutely loved, his name is Sam, he's still alive, is I was so proud of my dad when I was a young girl, because he always fought for the underdog. That was what he just always did. And I remember realizing that was something powerful when I was a kid. He used to, he just always wanted to see fairness, and he always was in deep pursuit of the truth. And a lot of the time that meant fighting for the underdog. And that was very powerful for me as a little girl. And as a teenager too, actually. So
I'm just going to jump back up to this screen here, so I can hold this up a wee bit closer on in my camera, which is sort of HD. Oh, you've disappeared. Where have you gone? She'll be back. I'm just going to hold this one up. We were talking about this just before we went live. This is the Scholar, and it's one of those colors that we know it looks incredible in real life, but it hasn't. There she is. It hasn't translated well into digital. Yeah, and so I just wanted to hold this up because it's the bracken base with the Liberty blue over the top.
Yes.
And so you get these almost granite-like blue flecks. You can see it there. And yes, you put it with Liberty, and it sings. It
absolutely beautiful
sings.
Together. Yeah.
And I just think that it is going to be one of those colors, and actually you can see the little flecks there. And I know that it's going to be one of those underdog colors, and I just wanted to give it a real push because it's again
gray. It's the perfect gray.
It is the perfect gray, and I just adore it. And it's absolutely lovely. Really is absolutely lovely.
It really is good. I do love that one, and I'm quite a fussy gray knitter. This one would look good on my dad, I think. That this is the lighter color, the Liberty of it, knitted up, and you can see how they would really work together. This is a pattern that I put out with Wardrobe Toolbox, but it's knitted up beautifully, and it's got quite a lot of the fleck through it. So those two together, they're absolutely gorgeous. But there's just so many stories, so many.
So what's the reaction been with your mum and dad with these stories? Like, they're like, oh, you're not going to do that? Because often when you have family stories, you just rubbish them because they're your family and you know them.
It's true. Although my mum's, Well, she's one of the ones who said to me, "Well, you have to have one for my grandmother," she said. I said, "I don't."
I can see
okay.
that.
So I did. So that was this one, and Grace for her grandmother. But also, I suggested a name. I was thinking of the things I could call one for Dad, and she was like, "Oh, I don't know if he's like that. I'm not. Do you really think he's like that?" I was like, "Yes, I do actually."
Well, with this one, Grace, it's funny you should mention this. I was watching a show last night on TV.
Oh, yeah.
I think it was on Neon or something, and it's from a few years ago. It was a murder mystery, but it's set in the 1950s, the mid 1950s.
Oh, lovely.
And so you can imagine the fashion and everything's fantastic. And there was a scene, and it's set in Scotland, and this there was just one of the characters that they were going to a dance in Scotland, and they had these beautiful, tailored wool coats.
Oh, yes.
And one of the wool coats that one of the characters was wearing was this color.
Oh, it'd be absolutely stunning.
It was, and as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, and because this is the most beautiful, for me, this is the most beautiful, and it's, again, the camera, it's actually a little bit more pink in real life.
It is. It is quite, it is a little more pink.
It's not really showing, it's showing this more washed out in both our cameras. It's got a little bit more depth to it in real life.
It's not yellow. It's quite it's got quite cool undertones.
Yeah, it's what I would call a nostalgic pink.
Yeah, you're right. Yes,
Yeah.
you are. Yeah, it is vintage. It is has a but yes, it has a vintagey vibe. It definitely has a vintagey vibe to it. And so does this one, I think. The Scholar also has that. In fact, a lot of them have a vintage vibe when I look at them. They even the one I'm wearing, it's quite electric, but actually it's a classic. This is a classic, almost a neutral, actually. A lot of these would make fantastic neutral colors in your wardrobe, I think.
Yeah. And also this Grace is, even though it's a really nostalgic pink, don't be afraid to put this is actually also, this is quite a masculine pink, I believe. This would look so beautiful. I mean, I can see my youngest son wearing this and looking amazing. Absolutely.
I think so, because it's not candy floss. I think that's the other thing. Like even this one, which is Electric Rebel. So this is named after my grandmother, who was the first woman to ride astride in the wire wrapper. She's not it's not too girly. It's just punchy. This is a punchy pink. I can see this one in beautiful cables, a raglan with cables, or something where you really embrace the punchiness of it.
And also, this is the final one. This is the Sport. You can knit this in its namesake design.
You could. Yes, you absolutely could. And Rebel. You
Rebel.
Could. It would look amazing in Rebel, actually, wouldn't it? But yeah, I am definitely doing myself a jumper in that, because it's but it's not, I will feel kind of powerful. I will feel like this kind of surge of excitement rather than feeling all girly with it, I think. Here's a couple of others. This one I think is also really tricky to see on the screen.
Yeah, I'm going to put this. It's funny, I just grabbed this one too.
Yeah, and that was the one you said was your favorite.
This is my absolute favorite, and it's because we've only ever had one color close to this in our range, and I like this one more because it's got more tonal fleck. This is very, very close to the Pine Cove in Cove, which I think you've got. I think when we first did Cove, that was the one you just loved. And actually,
almost like a petrol greeny color.
It is, and it is a really, really dark, intense green. And oh gosh, look, this one's even got some VM in it. Look, just shows you how natural these things are.
I know there's occasionally a bit of stick in there.
Yeah. And it's because, and I'm just going to say, we don't put this through an extra combing process, Southlander, and there's a reason for that, because we want it to evoke the natural state that it is. You don't want to. It's like having beautiful natural wavy hair. We don't want to GHD that, into oblivion. We want it to be free and exciting, and that's what we do.
It feels very Kiwi. It feels very New Zealand, this sort of slightly rough diamond kind of idea. I just love it.
I adore this one, because this one doesn't translate as well. I mean, Steph has photographed it perfectly, but it is one of those ones that is so much more exciting in real life.
It really is. And a jumper in this, I mean, I just, you would feel incredible all in this color. I think you'd feel like you were cloaked in some sort of protection, I think.
We've actually sent this off to be a Maudie.
Oh, this one that I'm wearing. Yeah, that would be beautiful, Maudie.
Yeah.
It would be gorgeous.
I think it would be an amazing Maudie.
Yeah. Well, this one's named after my other grandmother, Gran, and she wasn't even 5 foot. She was a feisty little thing, and she brought up 3 kids on her own after her husband died when my dad was just a little tiny boy, and he had 2 big sisters, and she had a really challenging life. Her whole life from start to finish was really challenging. She was just about 100. She almost got to 100 when she died. But Ivy, her name was Ivy, and she was Irish. She was born in Dublin, and we're not, my aunt, my aunt would like to think that her father could be James Joyce, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't. So I don't know, but that's the story that they have on that side, because apparently in the census for a while they were in the same address, her mother and James Joyce. But we can always dream. But
hey,
anyway,
that sounds like a bit of crack to me, doesn't it?
I'm like, okay. No, her dad, in the birth certificate, her dad is named, and his name is Adam Begg. And but it turns out Adam Begg already had a wife over in England, and then he got another wife somewhere else, and he was a little bit of a get around. So my poor gran at that time, because she was then illegitimate, that the scandal was horrendous, absolutely horrendous. So she was taken off her mother and her father, or father and her mother, and she was brought up until she was about 6 by a woman. I think her name was Mrs. Brown. And then after that, she was put in a Brethren orphanage. And so I don't know how long she stayed in there. I don't think it was a particularly pleasant place for her to be in the early 1900s. But when she was 18, she got on a boat and she came to New Zealand, and she never went back. And you would never have known she was Irish. She lost her accent as quick as she could, and she just started a new life over here. And
isn't that particularly out of Ireland, those stories? So my grandparents, my grandmother was Irish as well, and her parents, she was born in New Zealand, but her parents were from Belfast, and mother was Protestant, and her father was very high up in the Protestant church, and she fell in love with a much she was only in her early 20s, but she fell in love with a young Catholic boy who was in his late teens, and it was the wild romance. And she fell pregnant and got sent away, off, as they would do, off to the but being Protestant, I think she was popped off to the UK to family where she had the child, and that child was adopted out. And we've now since reconnected with that family in recent years. And then, but their love was so enduring that they actually ran away together and eloped, and like your gran, got on a boat and came to New Zealand.
Wow. You see, the thing is, Maree, I can tell all the stories about my family, and I'm lucky that I've been told all of these stories over and over and over, and they form such a strong part of me. But actually, we all have these stories, particularly I think particularly Kiwis. A lot of us are a melting pot of cultures, and we have stories from all over the world and through the generations of people that have done extraordinary things. And I think I was talking to my mum about it the other day, and she said, you should tell everyone, write the stories down. If you know what they are in your family, write them down. And if you don't know what they are, ask someone. If there's someone still alive who knows one of the stories, ask them. She said when she was a teacher, she'll probably tell us this in the podcast, but when she was a teacher, she was a teacher, she was a wonderful teacher, my mum, for a long time. And she used to teach intermediate age kids. So that's 12, 13-year-olds. That was her favorite age group to teach. And she would they do sort of who am I kind of things. And mum would try and make it even more interesting for them. So she'd get them to go home and ask their parents about their birth and how did they get their name. And she said it was amazing. Some of these kids had no idea. But I think that's also a lot of us. There's a lot of stories that, where did you get your name? Who were you? Who named you? Why did they name you? How did your grandparents meet? Are there any adventures? Who are the black sheep in the family? What did they do? We all have these stories, and I think of just hearing them, and I think it's our job to tell them to the kids too, so that they know the stories as they go through. It's been a huge part of my life. It's hugely powerful having this rich tapestry of, I thought, these incredible people that made me who I am. And
I think what you said before too, I think you actually brought it up beautifully. Like both, for people that don't know, Libby and I are very close in age, actually within a few months of each other. So,
Yeah.
so we were raised in exactly the sort of the same time period. And one of the things today, and I know I've done this with my kids, you've done it too with yours, is we have our house is a very social house. Like everyone that knows us here in Hawke's Bay, many of you who have come and visited the Bay or August nights, my place is a hub. People come and go all the time. And I've done that quite deliberately because that's how I was raised. It's not how my husband was raised, actually. He's actually come to learn to love it. His life was very compartmentalized comparatively, whereas mine, I'm from an Irish Maree family, so it is the doors were always open, the tea was always hot in the pot, and you know, and there was always a cold beer in the fridge. That's how they rolled.
Yeah.
And in a way, we've lost that today. And I think in the last few years, it's more important than ever to actually make sure that the tea is always hot in the pot. And there is always a cold beer or a glass of wine in the fridge, and a gentle air, and that front doors are always opened. And I think as a society, and I've really done that with our boys. And now that they're both teenagers, I knew this would happen with our house. Our house has become that house. That place. So it's the one that all the kids go to. And I love it. I love seeing all these kids get together and talk absolute smack, like total rubbish. But they're doing it in person together and sharing and creating their stories. And I just think that that's so important.
It is hugely important. That's exactly how I grew up too. And I've tried to do a lot of that with my kids. It's been interesting living out rurally because when we sort of just can't walk down the road, although they walk across paddocks to each other. But I think one of the things, my husband is quite quiet. We like chalk and cheese in that regard. But I was thinking with other people, I was just thinking this morning, actually, my mother-in-law is probably someone I should think about doing a colour for, because she also came from a huge Maudie family, and her husband was one of 11. She was, you know, from lots of kids as well. So my husband grew up with this enormous extended family, and I think, well, that's it. You see, you'd no hope. You were always going to meet me and join in with my family. But he likes to sort of sit back. He's used to the idea in a big family you can just sit back and you don't have to say anything because there's always so much going on. But yeah, so I think everybody can find their place. If you need to be center stage, you can do that too. But yeah, it is really, really important that we do that for our kids. I agree. And we tell lots of stories and make lots of memories together. And yeah, and it's funny you say that about the kettle being on, because I was just literally saying that the other day about my Facebook group, about the hangout that everybody comes to. I was saying to someone, I want it to feel like the kettle is always on. That's how I want it to feel. I want it to feel like you can come in there, take a breath and say, is kettle on? Someone got the kettle on? Yep, the kettle's on. Grab a cup of tea and just relax. It's exactly the feel I want, because that's the feel that I know. That I grew up with.
Now, Maureen's asking, the latest Maudie different from the original one? No, it's not, but it is. You have knitted it in a slightly different yarn. You've got the original there. So the original was done in our Chatswood, which is it's a recycled yarn, beautiful, soft and squishy. It's a twofold twist, and it is just lovely and anxious to wear. If Chatswood has a downside, is you do need to form a really lovely relationship with your D-pillar.
You do.
Has it done that for you?
I de-pilled mine yesterday.
Yeah.
But it's so cozy. It kind of, you wear it for a while and then you think, I'm not going to wear this out of the house until I de-pill it. And so you go through that phase and then you de-pill it and you can wear it out again. But no, it gets quite pilly and it's very oozy and it's very soft. It's just absolutely divine to wear. I have so enjoyed this yarn. But then I had this one. I didn't actually knit this one. Someone knitted it for me because I had too much to knit. But I've had this one knitted up in the Southlander in the Courage colour. And this gauge is slightly tighter than this gauge. So I have actually ended up going for a size smaller in the pattern so that I can have the gauge of the fabric I like. But I think you could easily just tighten up your stitches ever so slightly and knit the this normal gauge to pattern. It would be absolutely fine. But I love this cardigan. I love it more than I expected to love it, to be honest. It is such a good fit on me. I love the way I've got white stripes underneath, so you can see white popping through. But I love the way the stitches really pop more than they did in the other one. It has quite a lot of structure to
And
it.
that is because of the threefold twist on the Southlander versus, and it's a slightly higher angle of twist versus the loose, softer twofold twist, which also makes the Chatswood lovely and squishy, but it doesn't, you have that stitch definition. It's funny, Barbara's just saying, oh, please do make a dark blue based red. Do you know what's interesting? When you were describing Bren's family, that was the colour that was evoking in my head. Isn't that hilarious? It's amazing.
Funny. And actually, my mother-in-law's name is Snow, because she was the little blondie in the big Maudie family. But I know I was thinking blues for her. That's exactly what I was thinking. She really just pops in a beautiful blue. But yeah, something I was going to say about the little Maudie is that this one, because the gauge is slightly different than the original, but we just went for the gauge that I liked in this one in the size smaller. It's ended up, the neck is just ever so slightly more fitted, which I really have liked, and it's actually a little more cropped than the other one too. It could have been longer, but actually I love it. It's just a neat little fit. I'm trying to think where I put some photos in my mini mag. I'll put some up so you guys can see what it looks like on, but you achieve quite a different look. But yeah, this pattern, the Maudie pattern, is out today, so you can grab that if you like. And I think it is the perfect blueprint pattern. You could swap out these panels, you can put on different ribbing, you can take the thing out of the arm, you can put a different thing down the arm. It's such a nice little fit set-in sleeve. It's a really great blueprint. So I would love to see you take it and mix it up and make it, 5 different ways. You'd have 5 completely.
And the thing that's wonderful about that too is that you can actually play around with color, you can play around with striping, you can play around with making it plain. You can actually turn around and not have those panels at the front and put textured stitching. There's so much you can do. And I know that that's something that I've talked about actually on the diaries, is actually taking a pattern and using it as a template and actually getting the most out of that individual pattern, because I think we forget that we buy a pattern and you have to make it verbatim to how it's written. Well, actually, no, you don't. It's a bit like a recipe. If you want to add more chili to it, you add more chili. If you want to spice it up, or if you want to tone it down, well, a pattern is exactly the same.
Yeah, look, and the thing is that we talk about this a lot over in Wardrobe Toolbox, and the idea that you make it yours, and also that you just make it work for you. And I think the more you understand, the more knitting you do, and the more you begin to read your knitting, and the more you begin to understand what you love to wear, then those two things combine, and all of a sudden, boom, you're making this stuff that's quite unique and just so you as well. This is another one. So not everybody can get this one at the moment. You will later. Don't panic. It will come. But this is Wayfarer, and it's a little jumper that I put out because we did a big lesson on top-down short row set-in sleeves, and so this was a great example of that for the classes and things. But this is quite a simple jumper. I did it in short sleeves. There are instructions in the pattern for long sleeves as well. But this is another example of an awesome blueprint. So I'm going to take this pattern and I'm going to knit it 2 more times. I knitted it already in the Truly Myrtle color, the Liberty color, but I haven't quite decided what other color to knit it in, but I want a long sleeve version. I might even do something like the storyteller yarn and really have a beautiful rich brown color for a long sleeve version. But the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the sport weight, I'm going to mix it with a mohair, and I'm going to do a really neat little cropped off 3/4 length sleeves with the mohair through it. I think that'll look amazing. So,
and having done, I'm actually working on a project at the moment doing using cozy and a mohair, and I can tell you the softness that you get. So any of the, like if you find Southlander a little bit too rusty, that disappears with the mohair. So
I have to say though, this is
pretty good with the wash.
Flippin', it's really lovely, and I would put it in the semi-soft category. It's definitely not it's not too toothy. I mean, it has a good amount of grip to it, I think, when it's sort of holding itself together. But this is like to me, this is like the jumper that I reach for when I'm cold, that kind of jumper. It's either if I'm really slopping, I do love those Outlaw Bohemians because they are just, luxury yarns. I do love those as well. This is the ultimate softness. But this is one of those, now I can do anything kind of jumpers. I'm cold, but now I can do anything because I've got, proper farmy wool on that's going to keep me really cozy. So
and for our we've got a lot of North Americans or Northern Hemisphere in the chat at the moment. To give you an idea, like Southlander is, if you're used to using like a lot of the Scandinavian wools or the Icelandic wools or even some of the Scottish stuff, I think Southlander sits sits softer than those. Like they have a little bit more toothiness than this. And once you wash Southlander, and it's the same with any of our Perindales, because the amount of processing we do over both Southlander and Perindale is actually quite minimal, because we don't want to strip out the benefits and the characteristics of the fiber. With a soak, it really does soften things up significantly. I've just recently reblocked a number of I've done about 4 reblockings this winter, and one of them was a Southlander sport item, and it's so beautiful. And in fact, the County yarn that I had knitted it with bled.
Oh, really?
Just one colour. Just the one colour, just the red. But you know what? I looked at it and I thought, you know what? I'm not going to panic. It's in the oatmeal, and I managed to, because I noticed it when it was still wet, I was able to actually go out and get the rest of it out by just gently dabbing with a sponge. But then I looked at it and I thought, you know what?
I can live with it.
I can live with it. I really can. I'm not going to worry about it. But the feel of that fabric now is it's softened again. It's
just lovely. Yeah, it's really lovely and soft. In fact, Delene is saying my everyday item is a shawl, and it's done in Southlander. Yeah, because I even think that you could get away with a hat in it too. I think it's totally softened up. To me, it reminds me, for those of you who are in the UK who have tried some of the blacker yarns, it reminds me of some of the blacker yarns with some of those heritage fibers, particularly the Tamar yarn. But I think it's softer than that. I think it's softer than the Tamar. I've got a jumper in that, and it's still got a little bit of grippiness to it, whereas this is really just softened up enormously, even after only one wash for blocking.
So we're going to remind everybody the yarn is available now. So it's available at trulymyrtle.com, or you can grab it from us at Skeinz, at skeinz.com. If you're on our newsletter or the Mini Mag newsletter, that has gone out to everybody now. So you'll be able to grab those. We're able to also, we've got some patterns. Libby's obviously got all of her patterns. So they're all there. And most importantly is, if you've got questions, make sure you join us for the Skeinz Diaries on Monday. Monday at 11, we're going to do a full Q&A on all of this. So we're going to actually dive into, I featured a few patterns, including the new Maudie and Phoenix, which has been knitted at the moment. That's another one we're going to talk about. And we're also going to talk a bit about yarn substitution between using the 2 different weights, because both of these yarns are a little bit of chameleon in nature, and you've got a lot of latitude, and it's about giving you confidence with your substitutions within existing designs to actually work with that latitude. So we're going to cover all of that off on Monday.
Yeah, it'd be really great. And I think there's a few patterns that have just immediately pop into my mind where I'm like, oh, I should make that I'm really dying to make them up in this new yarn, because I think they'll just work beautifully, put a new twist on things as well. So it'll be really good to talk a bit more about.
It'll be so good. So don't forget that Skeinz Diaries, that will be a Monday our time, Sunday in Northern Hemisphere time, 11 a.m. for us. So do come and join us then. Thank you so much. And
it's my pleasure. I'm just going to answer Julie. She's saying the color I'm wearing comes up as blue on the screen. How true is the color? So it's quite teal. It's quite a teal. It's quite a teal greeny blue. It really is.
A little bit more green on my side, Julie, actually.
Yeah. Yes, it does. So if I compare it to the blue next to me, I might still look blue, but it's quite a teal, lovely teal. So,
it's a bit like the old Air New Zealand teal on steroids.
Yeah, it is a bit like that. So I am going to have shade cards. I'm hoping they'll be available, and you're going to have some too, aren't you? So we're hoping that they'll be ready in the next couple of weeks. As soon as they're ready, I'll pop them up on the website so you can see them and you can grab them. And yeah, then you'll be able to see all of the 10, and there are 10 colors in total. Just so I know how helpful it is to see them in the flesh. So I'll have those as fast as I can. It's just getting everything together. It's taking a little bit long. And the other thing I wanted to say is that I've loaded a whole lot on and I know Skeinz has got them there too, but there's a whole lot of patterns loaded up on my website where I've actually got the little booklets available. So if you are someone that likes to have a printed pattern, come and have a little look. I haven't got them all, but I've got a number. And if there's some that you really want, just give me a yell because I can get more too. I'm just going to see how many people actually want to get in the booklets.
Yay.
But fantastic. I'm just reading all your comments now. Oh, it'll be good. It'll be really good to answer all your questions on Monday.
I think
try and have this jumper. I'm going to try and have that one finished by Monday. That one's called Firebird. This is my Firebird jumper.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
I can't wait
for that one.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on this special edition of the Diaries. Thank you, Libby. We will see you all again on Monday. So have some great knitting over the weekend. Make sure you jump on and grab those shades. As we said, trulymyrtle.com or skeinz.com. You'll be able to get them from there. We've got them all in our Truly Myrtle category as well as our Southlander category. So
brilliant. And we both can send anywhere in the world. We're both set up to send anywhere in the world. So I think we've got some good prices on the couriers.
We do
at the moment. Cool.
Right, take care, everyone.
Okay. Bye. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.